This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Chapter 33, Premonitions. Unconscious, subconscious, preconscious, shadowed consciousness, altered consciousness. Just look at all the ways we cannot be conscious. To get at this, there are a lot of methods to approach what we know, but don't know that we know. We could spend an entire lifetime probing into this unawareness, and some people do. Classify it, codify it, poke and prod, philosophize, create a double-blind study, look under taboo-rocks and then under the earth that supports that rock, then under that and all the way to hot lava. Metaphorically, of course. There are more tools and tricks than could ever be amassed to get at those pesky inner mysteries that make us do what we don't want and not do what we do want. Still, with all this, we fool ourselves all the time. What's a soul searcher to do? I've got a little trick that helps me get at what I can't seem to otherwise unearth. I ask myself, what do I know that I don't want to know? This flip of the switch turns everything upside down. Ask it quick enough, without much thinking, and you'll be amazed what comes into your head and out of your mouth. I really don't want to go to college. I actually hate my job. My parents were shit, no matter what everyone else thinks. My seasonal slump isn't seasonal anymore. The house and yard are getting too big for me. She's probably not going to get better. I don't want to do what I have to do to make this work. It takes a huge amount of bravery to ask the questions you're pretty sure you won't like the answers to. It takes even more to not dismiss the answer that comes. And so, depending on how deeply we don't want to know, or can't afford to know, or can't deal with knowing, or are attached to all the things knowing might upend in our lives, we stay in our unknowing. We can claim a lack of complicity, but, well, maybe not. In our not knowing, we hide ourselves from ourselves. We shut down our soul, tell it to keep quiet for God's sake. We tamp down our spirits so far, hardly any light actually shines through our life. We tell untrue stories to ourselves and others to keep our truths hidden. We stuff it down or drink it through or anxiety away our way, day after day. It's cowardly, but you can't really blame us when even that cowardice is likely unconscious. Oddly enough, this is especially hard when things are good, going well, great even. When we know that the thing we know that we don't want to know will upset the goodness we are enjoying. When knowing will make it bad or at least worse. Why know this stuff when life is chugging along? We're balancing it all well enough, aren't we? Can we really afford the more true and honest story? Better the devil we know than the devil we don't. And so it was for me, just a few months shy of 20 years awake. I knew there was something more, or at least next. Vaguely and foolishly, I said something like, I guess I could go to the next level now. I wasn't even sure what that meant or what part of me said it, or why. Things were good, very good. And had been for so long. I had relaxed into it, felt safe, whole. It was out of the blue, but I do remember saying it, rather some part of me saying it. The greater me? I'm sure the little me thought a next level would be a good thing, an easy step, a little stretch. I wasn't remotely in the ballpark of everything can and will get fucked. Except that is exactly where I was. I'll tell you about it, but keep in mind, this is retrospect now. Back then, Even at the ripe age of 55, I didn't even begin to allow myself to allow for all the possibilities, dark and light. I didn't want to. And up until then, I didn't have to. But it's not like I wasn't warned. Enter the labyrinth. When you wake up to greater consciousness, it's easy to think your ego has been demolished. You're awake now. That's the story. Yes, you win. Or, at least, have lapped the majority of your fellow humans several times over. People look at you like you've made it, and you have. You've scratched that lucky spiritual lottery ticket. Who doesn't want that? It's especially easy to believe you've arrived because, 1, wouldn't that be nice, and 2, there's little to compare it to. There's no mirror, no precedent, at least not from this century. And if you compare yourself to who you were pre-awakening, it's truly night and day. If day compared to night isn't good enough for you, maybe you're just greedy. For example, a good friend of mine had a next-level awakening several years after me. She called to tell me she was fully and permanently enlightened. The state of bliss she'd entered into did appear to be persistent, so I was happy for her. Even so, I was also suspicious. Fully and forever enlightened is a big, big thing. I'm not even sure the Buddha got there, though he is credited for it in our imaginations. But what did I know? Maybe she found something I hadn't. After about 4 months, she came back down to reality. From what I could tell, she was much the same as she'd been before. She laughed at herself. A good sign, I thought. As for me, what I knew 20 years post-awakening was this. The ego is not demolished, no matter how much time you spend in the eternal lightness of being. It's incredibly resilient and sneaky. It's gone underground for a minute, maybe, but gone? No, sorry. It feels only fair to tell you because, I repeat, this stuff is hard to figure out on your own. Now older and wiser, we hope, I could see all the ways Robin's brain synapses were set to fire to Robin. Not greater Robin. Little old, ordinary reality Robin. I followed my path relentlessly, as a style, not an intent on something grander than what I already had. And still, there she was, showing up morning after morning after morning. Hello, you in the meat suit. Hi there, you who wants to screw up my serenity. Well, there you are. Even the most conscientious, the most alert, the most well-intended, the most awake and aware aren't. Not all the time. It's not fair to expect this of yourself or anyone else. Still, we do. I blame it on the mythical, magical storytelling of the oh-so-enlightened ones, which is one reason I wrote this piece of work. I rather doubt, after all these stories, anyone is going to think that I'm all that and a bag of chips. Then again, maybe that's a good way to think of me. All that and a bag of chips. The thing is, the surface identity, the self, some call it an ego, mine's name is Robin, does not like losing territory. True awakening threatens to stifle, if not kill, the human self and all her instincts. Sort of like the sunrise obliterates the night. Sounds good, but this means that the critical built-in survival mandates, the hardware in all of us that keeps us from walking off cliff sides, prancing down dark alleys stark naked, or missing signs of potential danger in our peripheral vision — did you ever thank your ego for that, I wonder? — are not going away just because we traveled the universe and learned all things were perfect from a great distance. Besides, if every one of us is going to return to being fully enlightened for all eternity, my best guess is this is true, there's really no reason to miss the human experience for the blink of an eye we're having it. Add to this concoction of magical moving mirrors that some who awaken become highly intuitive, so they are almost never wrong. Can't you imagine how the ego loves this? Scotty and I had a joke that when I'd start a thought with, I could be wrong, but he would end it with, "You rarely are." Almost. Rarely. Wrong. Dangerous words, those. Also, the more conscious one is, and this has been proven by research, though I had no idea in the early years that anyone was researching consciousness at all, the more unfeeling one is. This is not a cold and uncaring unfeeling, but more of an unflappableness. If everything is perceived as perfectly okay, it's perfectly okay. Even if others want you to get all dramatic on them, or rather with them. A bigger picture allows one to see the rise and fall of all things, and so the day-to-day movements of both good things and bad things never feel overly joyous or treacherous. Why waste emotion on the unimportant story details, which most of them are? Even the cliffhangers of life have a next morning for most of us. All that emotional drama seems inefficient. On top of this, I know we are going long here, but this is important story stuff. The stories of others quickly become transparent to us as we awaken. In fact, one of the telltale signs of early awakening is how irritated someone becomes at other people's, very real to them, stories. They won't see their own yet, but it's plain as day when listening to someone else go on and on and on. Especially people who only want to take up story space without actually saying anything. Today, I can give you a map of the consciousness journey, several different maps in fact, complete with signposts. With just a little bit of conversation, I can reasonably accurately pinpoint where anyone is along the continuum. But, fair warning, most people won't like it if you do this. They want their stories of doom, of gloom, of glory, of grandiosity. In short, the catastrophic cacophony of the caughtness in the web of life. Unless they are paying you to dispel the darkness, that's what I'm paid for, it's usually wise to keep your consciousness to yourself. Besides, you could be wrong, even if you rarely are. Now weave in magic, which, if you are like me, is often, but not always, at your fingertips. I don't expect anyone to believe that, but I know what I know. Step into my magical world, won't you? Because I really can promise what I promise. Repeatable and reliable, my professional trademark. I've been doing it for decades now. People can feel that is true, even if they don't understand or believe in anything but ordinary reality. So, with all those details, you can imagine how I was not expecting my life to ever fall apart again. It was not in my story potential set, not even a little. Why would all this magical coolness ever end? Why even consider going through another round of alchemy? Starting over with another blazing fire? Who would do that? Why? For what? What would be the point? Well, to answer that, let me set the stage, because my path had other ideas, and something was trying to warn me. Somewhere around this 20 years awake mark, I found myself internally saying, repeatedly, without realizing why, that I wasn't sure if I had another loss in me. I'd even said it aloud a few times, which let it make its way into the stories I shared with others. I hadn't been thinking about if this were true, but I'd gone through one more very intense loss, something else I'm not at liberty to write about, and yet others were poking at my serenity. I'd taken on the role of helping a friend who I loved. He was always living his very solo life on the edge, so he had no one else to help. My first task was to rescue him from living half out of his mind, stuck on a floor with only a mattress and a radio in the dead cold of a Midwestern winter, without heat in his house. I started with a better mattress and a sub-zero sleeping bag. Soon enough, though, Scotty and I had to help him get signed up for medical disability through Social Security, find and furnish a rent-reduced apartment, and make sure the bills got paid. All that was hard to watch. But then came the suicide attempts. One after another, a knife to the throat, a brick to the skull, drinking antifreeze, and more. Also a call to police to arrest him for something he didn't do, just to be arrested for his sins. As the one who had agreed to be the point of contact, all those calls came to me. You can imagine how this triggered my heart after Ricky's suicide. Doctors, hospitals, psychiatrists, police, repeat. Then he had a heart attack, then a stroke. When he went into surgery for a bypass, he told the doctor he hoped he wouldn't wake up. I was beginning to hope so too, for his sake. Only after almost a dozen crises did I finally break my own rules about not using magic without being asked. Well, sort of. I called upon the God of his understanding and reamed his God out. I said this hell was unacceptable for someone who loved God the way my friend did, and God better do something about it, given this was his jurisdiction. Amazingly, my friend actually got better, and today is married and handling his own affairs again. His God listened. Damn straight. The curious thing about this was that somewhere around the 10th suicide attempt, I broke down and cried. It took me that long to push me to my limits, but I finally hit them. I'd also helped Terry through a rough round of cancer and chemo. Terry, the optimistic, the most healthy eater, the most generous of friends. Ever my listener, ever my source of kindness and understanding, but also my teller of hard truths when those were called for. I was so grateful not to lose her. She was the one who got it all, from all sides of me. She'd even become a student of mine, which was a little weird, yet she never lost sight of our friendship. I needed her more than I'd realized, and her close call made that all too real. What would I do without her? I was glad I didn't have to find out. But what if something happened to yet someone else close to me? How would my enlightenment stand up to that? I'd never been shaky about it, but I was now. In addition, I confessed to Scotty that even though my work and impact was stronger than ever, I felt like a part of me was dying. I didn't understand it. He didn't either. My first clue that things were going to go from hard to worse came a few years before the others, but it was a big enough signal I ought to have registered it more deeply. To be honest, I simply couldn't make sense of it. One day, when making a shamanic journey of exploration, meaning not for anyone in particular, my guide, Lion, suddenly refused to speak to me, refused to even stand to come with me. To understand how strange this was, from the very beginning we had worked together in each and every journey. He was my primary guide in teaching others, and I was in the middle of teaching an apprenticeship, so others were relying on Lion through me. To be fair, Lion was never warm and fuzzy and would rebuff any intimate gestures such as a hand on his back, which I would have liked. Nor did he have any name other than Lion, leading me to believe he was an archetype, not a specific animal with an individual personality. I admit to wishing he was like Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, but he never once acted like that character. Even so, I had come to trust him with anything and everything, and he always delivered. Always. I was guided, given insight, and protected. We were a team. No shaman does this work alone. I was honored to have him as my spirit partner. Yet now, he would not budge or speak. No explanation. Couldn't be bothered with even a hint, no matter what I said or did, nor how hard I tried. If he had been a product of my imagination, I would have imagined him saying sorry and returning to normal. Nope. How unkind, I thought. Truly hurt. Devastated and unable to work solo, I tried again and again to make contact. Each time, I sensed more and more clearly that we were simply done. Something I definitely did not want to know, but could no longer avoid knowing. I reminded myself that I had been told from the start that shamanism was to be a path only for a time, and it had been quite a long time. Also, if I was honest, I didn't want to teach shamanism anymore. There was always one drama or another, and someone doing things I asked them not to do that I would have to go fix. I was always on constant alert for someone needing to be bailed out. That heaviness weighed on me, especially over time. I'd told my classes this may be the last year I'm teaching shamanism, but I'd said it for a few years running. Somehow, I always thought giving it up would be my choice, my timing. Wrong again. I asked Lion what I'd done wrong. I asked why no words of explanation. I asked why not wait until the apprenticeship was over. No answers to any of it. To this day, Lion has never again spoken to me in a personal journey, though on rare occasions he has shown up on behalf of a client. I was heartbroken, confused, angry, frustrated, bewildered. Again, it felt like a part of me was dying. I felt hollow, alone, vulnerable. With little choice, I passed my shamanic mantle on to a long-time and loyal student and allowed another to teach from my materials. I didn't know exactly where to turn, as my other guides were silent on the matter. They were not going to explain what Lion himself was not willing to. I accepted it and moved on. Really, there was not much choice. Though I had always taught that you're never not a shaman, the calling and path can end. Only rarely do I work with that healing modality, though it is always there for a client in need. The next clue, or maybe we could call it a nudge towards knowing what I did not want to know, came on my front porch, a place I spent hours and hours of time meditating, contemplating, and reflecting every day, even in the dead of winter. Scotty and I had moved to a house built by the Freemasons in 1822 on the eastern shore of Maryland. There was no question this farmhouse was to be ours. It had farmland for Scotty, plenty of room, and the countryside looked just like Ireland, something that touched me deeply. It was beyond magical. The Freemasons built it in much the same way as the pre-Celtic people built Newgrange in Ireland. The half-mile drive was laid out to allow the winter solstice sun to rise and gently progress up the drive, through a massive stone altar, into the front door, along the length of the house, and out the back door. It reversed on the summer solstice. Refurbished in the year before we arrived, just in time for our need, everything was done to perfection. The original descendants of the builders included a feng shui master, and so there were crystals below every threshold floorboard from room to room, and even the paint numbers were chosen for significance. I felt it the moment I entered. Others did too. That said, the house was haunted. There was no doubt about that. Built in the area of Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad, there was a hoop drilled into the basement walls, no doubt to chain a slave. It gave me the willies. In order to live in peace, I placed energetic barriers between the main floor and the basement, but also between the second floor and the attic, where 2 little girls once had bedrooms before they died young. I know this because there was a graveyard on the property. One day, I walked into my bathroom to find a ghost man walking through the wall on one side and then through the wall on the other side. I was surprised, but not alarmed. I tuned in. He was just passing through. Never even noticed me. If you need any more convincing, I wasn't the only one who saw ghosts in our Irish-like mists. A student was visiting along with many others one day when she went out for a run down the drive. She came back early asking what we wanted. We didn't know what she was talking about. Who waved me back? She insisted on knowing. No one, we said. She argued, yes, someone halfway down the drive was waving her back. Not us or anyone we saw was all we could say. We agreed. Must have been a ghost. Even though I never liked being alone out at night on the property, I loved the farm. The fields growing season after season, one year wheat, the other beans, as I curled up on the front porch swing. My son-in-law even made me a swinging bed. I wasn't any good with the farm animals, that was Scotty's world, but I could deeply appreciate the beauty of that countryside. It was peaceful, and it felt like home. Home enough for my own family members to show up as I would swing on the porch. My father a few times, my mother once. Yeah, those family members. They always wanted to discuss something, but there was one day that felt so ominous, I knew it to be a warning. My father, mother, and Ricky, all together, were standing next to each other just a few feet from my swing. The looks on their faces, something like "poor Robin," frightened me. They didn't say a word, only looked at me. But I had never seen them together. They never showed up only to look on, and I'd never seen such pity on their faces. I went inside and told Scotty something was going to happen, something bad. But nothing did, so I let it go. The third warning was a dream, one I almost immediately forgot, but would remember all too well soon enough. I was in the desert Southwest, a place that looked like Arizona, not far from where 100 Ways to Sunday took place. Except I was in a neighborhood cul-de-sac, walking into a typical 3-bedroom rancher. The grounds were brown, as they had been when I found Ricky in the ethers after his death, and the air was as still as the desert itself. Suffocating, really. A native man looking very much like the First Nations actor Graham Greene was settling me into the house. A few small boys were running around playing with vintage wood toys, and a few older people were removing everything from the house, except a few pieces of basic furniture. All the art, the color, the decor, all personalization was gone. I suspected this was a kind of vision quest and thought, pretty cushy place for a vision quest compared to the wilderness. It made sense, though, since I was never one to actually take to the wilderness, and a voluntary vision quest had never been on my bucket list. What for? I started to speak, but the native man interrupted me, monotone and deadly serious. "Don't talk." I started to argue and asked about my medication, something for my thyroid I'd taken since my first child was born. He repeated, "Don't talk," and insisted he would take care of getting the medicine. No other words were spoken. Soon enough, they all left, the native man saying nothing about why or what this was about. He locked me in, taking the key with him. I looked around the barren house and thought to myself, I hope he comes back. I would not remember this dream until that scene had become my life. From then on, I would never forget it. One last dream was even more clear. I was on a riverbank standing next to a sarcophagus, a wooden box painted with an elaborate Egyptian figure on it. I was afraid to look inside, but I didn't need to. Out stepped a mummy. I could not see who it was, but I knew someone was going to die. I asked who, and understood that it was to be Terry, after all. Something I truly, truly did not want to know. It was not only Terry, though. I, too, was about to die. Early on, the guides had told me they were not so worried about me falling into ego as they were of me not stepping onto my path, that I would be humbled as needed. Well, I had stepped onto my path with all that I had, and was as committed as ever. I guess that wasn't good enough. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.